quotes from J.K. Rowling, you would be hard-pressed to say, oh, this is a person who hates trans people.
She's now written an essay on her blog addressing the accusations.
Why is everyone so mad at me? A fact can't be bigoted.
She needs to sort out her priorities.
I am about as old as the Harry Potter films. When I was a kid, both this franchise and its author were pretty much universally beloved. I never read the books, I only read Marks and Playboy like a real Chad. But I have just rewatched all these movies and so obviously it's become pretty popular amongst the left to criticize Harry Potter. But really, when we ask, is Harry Potter bad? What we're really asking is Harry Potter problematic? Does J.K. Rowling's escapades ruin Harry Potter? And lastly, actually, is this story that good in the first place? Who are you to say? What do you know about literature? Well, granted, not much, but I can read, which is increasingly becoming a rare thing in my country.
But you just said you haven't even read the books.
Look babes, this isn't serious law analysis. I'm not Harrison Splimby. I am mostly going to be going off the movies because I think that's how most people have consumed Harry Potter, including myself. But yes, I know that there are a lot of book and movie differences, and I know what they are because people like you won't stop going on about them. Also, 2 of my exes were Potterheads. I think I probably suffered enough. Most of the plot of Harry Potter pulls from fantasy tropes that have been done to death. Harry Potter is the chosen one, Voldemort is pure evil without a more complex motivation beyond his wizard Austrian painter, and a lot of time in these books is taken up searching for MacGuffins. But just because these aren't the most original ideas doesn't mean that Harry Potter is a bad story. Let's compare Harry Potter to a little indie film called Star Wars. The plot of Star Wars, original Star Wars, isn't exactly... it's not that complicated. The whole thing's pretty straightforward, there isn't a lot of moral conflict. And then in the 2nd/5th one, it features what is undoubtedly the franchise's most iconic moment. Wrong clip, sorry.
I am your father.
I think it's pretty easy to forget that this is soap opera stuff. No, I Am Your Father is something you'd find in EastEnders.
You can't tell me what to do, you ain't my mother! Yes, I am!
It's not exactly that deep, is it? No one really cares about that. The appeal of Star Wars isn't in its plot, it's in its characters and its world building. I mean, really the appeal of Star Wars is having drunken lightsaber fights at 4 in the morning with your mates. In the same way that the real appeal of Harry Potter is imagining yourself at Hogwarts, snorting up those every flavour beans.
My favourite's ketamine.
Why am I upside? I'm way too self-conscious for this. Okay, so I'm not going to criticise Harry Potter's plot for being overly simplistic. Even though it is. Not everything has to be Game of Thrones series 1 to 4.
Besides, this is just silly kid stuff for babies.
Hold on there, sister. Although the series starts out being for children, it's pretty clear by Goblet of Fire that young kids aren't supposed to be reading this. I mean, just look at this thing. She is chunky. Secondly, I reject the idea that just because something is for kids means that it can't have mature or complex themes. Something Harry Potter doesn't really have. Just look at any Michael Morpurgo book. Warhorse might not be the next Hamlet, but it does treat its characters and by extension the readers with respect. When Warhorse ends up being taken by the Germans aren't portrayed as being irredeemable monsters. They're written more or less the same way as the British soldiers are. The true villain of the story isn't the enemy's side, it's the war itself. Pretty deep for a kid's book. Despite being several times longer, Harry Potter just doesn't have the same level of complexity. I mean, it's pretty much a given if you're in Slytherin, you're just the worst. Almost every Slytherin is a bad guy, and even the good ones, they're not exactly good people. But come on, Rowling's here telling a very different story. Warhorse is based on real life events, right? Harry Potter is just fantasy. It's still got the overall message that magic racism is bad. Does it though? We'll get to it later. Watching these movies back to back sure doesn't do this series any favours. Half of the first movie wouldn't have even happened if Hagrid just kept his fucking trap shut and stopped spilling all of Dumbledore's secrets to a bunch of 11-year-olds. repeatedly. In the second film, loads of people and ghosts and cats and shit get petrified from looking at a basilisk. You see, if you were to look at the basilisk directly, that is a tough word, basilisk directly, then you'd die. But luckily, every single person who saw it only saw it on a technicality. Yeah! Which is pretty lucky, innit? My favourite Rowling convenience has to be with how she deals with the time turners. Time turners are portable time machines that get introduced in book 3. But in book 5, all of the time turners get destroyed because the cabinet, which all of them were in, gets knocked over by accident. So I guess that's time travel gone out of the Harry Potter series. If only you didn't put them all in the same cabinet. A lot of fans of the books tend to decry the movies for cutting so much stuff out, seemingly unaware that a lot of the cut out material is meandering and bad. Spew! The change most fans get worked up about is the absence of the Marauders. Again, I haven't read the books, but I sort of assume that Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot and Ponce? I sort of assumed Wormtail was Wormtail, because that's his name. Sirius gets called Padfoot in one of the movies, and then it's just a process of elimination. Like, okay, obviously Mooney's Lupin and James Potter is the other one. I just worked that out myself, you know? It's not that complicated, Potterheads, like, calm the fuck down. Also, some parts of the books get rearranged a bit. Take, for example, the differences between the books and the films and how they deal with Neville Longbottom's parents. So in the book version of Goblet of Fire, Karkaroff mentions how Barty Crouch Jr. was one of the people who tortured Neville Longbottom's parents. We then actually meet them in Order of the Phoenix in a sort of wizarding mental hospital. And yeah, I actually did read the scene, it's a pretty good scene. The film version of Goblet of Fire is kinda the same, but it's a blink and you'll miss it moment. However, in the Order of the Phoenix film, it's completely different. It's basically just a scene of Harry and Neville talking to each other, but it's got a real nice, quiet simplicity to it, and I think it really works. After all, you can't include everything from these books. It's not a TV show, although they are making that, so see you again in 2 years. Although Neville gets treated pretty well, some character changes are just all over the place. Take for instance Ginny Weasley. Who even is Ginny Weasley? She barely says or does anything, and she even goes back to Hogwarts in Deathly Hallows. Like, what is that about? I don't get why Harry likes her, and I don't get why she likes Harry. Is it just because he's the chosen one or what? And when Harry is saying goodbye to Hermione and Ron, he doesn't even say goodbye to Ginny? Like, what? Actually, hold on a second, because he doesn't say goodbye to Ron either. He hugs Hermione, but Ron, not a word. He's just left standing there like a total fucking hippogriff. Aren't you guys, like, best friends? Did Harry suddenly decide he doesn't like gingers? Valid. I know a lot of book fans cry out that Ron gets done dirty in the movies, with many of his best moments going to Hermione. And yeah, after Chamber of Secrets, Ron definitely feels more and more just like a spare part. This is the second time you've spoken out of turn, Miss Granger. 5 more points from Gryffindor for being an insufferable know-it-all. Ron, who told Hermione she was a know-it-all at least twice a week, said loudly, "You ask a question and she knows the answer. Why ask if you don't want to be told, mate?"
You take pride in being an insufferable know-it-all.
He's got a point, you know.
It really makes you wonder particularly what Hermione sees in him. I literally have never bought the Hermione-Ron romance. It gets hinted at here and there in the films, and then in Half-Blood Prince, she just tells Harry, "Oh, fucking got the hots for Ron." Maybe they're more interesting in the books, but in the films, I just don't buy it. Again, what do these characters actually see in each other? Well, I get what Ron sees in Hermione, but what does she see in him? In the films, Ron is just a comic relief idiot, whereas Harry is smart, capable, the literal chosen one. Maybe Hermione really likes gingers, I don't know. It's not really ginger, is it? It's more like ginger adjacent. There's a few plot points that get lost in the adaptation as well. So for example, in the books, apparently Sirius Black gives Harry a two-way mirror so that he and Harry can talk to each other. Harry forgets about this and he only rediscovers it after Sirius is already dead, and then he gets real mad and he accidentally breaks the mirror. But then he takes the biggest piece with him, and the rest is stolen by Mundungus Fletcher when he robs the Black family home, with the pieces later going to Dumbledore's brother. In the films, Harry has a piece of the two-way mirror in Deathly Hallows Part 1. And that's it. The ending of Part 1 is kind of reliant on you knowing what the mirror is, but fuck it, I guess. A character-driven plot element that I've never really understood is Harry's consistent unpopularity. In movie 2, everyone thinks Harry is a murderer. In movie 4, everyone thinks he's a cheat and a liar. And in movie 5, everyone thinks he's a liar again, but for different reasons. This is baffling on multiple levels. Firstly, Harry is rich, a plot point Rowling often forgets for some reason. Maybe you could buy your best friend a new wand, Harry. Remember that big pile of gold you have? Fucking Tories, am I right? Oh, yeah, sorry. Harry is rich, he's the best Quidditch player at Hogwarts, he's famous, and he doesn't act like a total bellend. From that stuff alone, he should already be one of the most popular wizards at Hogwarts, and that's ignoring the time he stopped Wizard Austrian Painter when he was just 11. And 12. Oh, and 1. But everyone just decides he's not to be trusted because his name's in the Goblet of Fire or whatever, and now everyone hates him. But don't worry, they all go back to unanimously adoring him. But then he can't even get a date at the dipshit dance. If this guy can't get a date, then the rest of us are doomed. Just because he's a short king, I mean honestly. Of course, half of them hate him again in time for the next movie because they don't believe that Voldemort is back. Even though they all saw Cedric's body and have no reason not to believe Harry. He's my boy! I wouldn't believe him either. Clearly he has no idea what he's talking about. I do get why this was done. You can't have Harry be good at literally everything he does and be liked by everybody. It's just not realistic. But the thing is, Harry's consistent unpopularity just feels so forced as a result. If the characters behave like real people, then they would be all over Harry all of the time. As is, he doesn't even seem to be the most popular guy in his year. Like seriously, Wizard Jesus can't get a date to the ball? Really? Gotta keep it relatable. But none of these issues are quite as pronounced as some of the stuff that they cut from the books, which, Ooh. Rowling has gone through many controversies, not just with transphobia, but also some pretty questionable depictions of Native American culture, some fairly sus looking goblins, and also the fact that the wizarding world has slavery, which doesn't change even by the novel's end. Yikes! This led some on the left to re-examine some of the Harry Potter series' political themes. There's a lot of problematic stuff in there, which has already been covered by YouTubers like Sean on ContraPoints and a lot of other creators bigger and smarter than I am. So I'm just going to give you the highlights. In the books, Hermione found SPEW, Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare. You see, in Harry Potter, house elves are literal slaves, bound to live in subservience under the control of their wizard masters. SPEW is Hermione's attempt at making an organisation to free the house elves, but other characters often belittle her for this, as all of the house elves... Sorry, almost all of the house elves don't want to be free because they're just naturally subservient, so they don't get freed, and this subplot goes nowhere, and yeah, I wonder why this was cut out the films. Even Harry is fairly neutral on the whole slavery thing after he frees Dobby, and the fact that everyone treats Hermione for being a fucking weirdo that she has a problem with slavery, particularly since Hermione's been retconned into being a black character now. Other creators have made the obvious parallels between the enslavement of the house elves and the real life enslavement of Africans. Again, go watch those other creators. You might want to also watch this one by Verily Bitchy, highlighting Harry Potter's real life connections to modern day slavery. Again, yikes! But house elves are just naturally subservient, Hermione. You're just making a fuss over nothing. These young people getting so woke about everything. I mean, honestly. First they want to get rid of slavery. Next they'll be saying women should be allowed to vote. After all, women are just naturally subservient, right? They're born to want to do all the cooking and the cleaning and the housework. Right, Rowling? Yeah? And women like it when you objectify them. At least the ones in my DMs do. So anyone saying that women should have equal rights to men, they're just being hysterical wokists, I suppose. Just making a fuss over nothing, I mean, honestly. Never mind Dobby as a house elf who didn't like being a literal slave. The other characters make clear Dobby is just... weird. Almost every other elf is fine with the status quo, and freeing them would be cruel and against their nature. Yikes. Another big change between the books and the films is Snape. Maybe the best scene in the whole film series is when it's revealed that Snape was a good guy all along. They gloss over the fact that he used to be a Death Eater, which... okay, and show him pleading to Dumbledore to hide all the Potters before Voldemort can murder them. In the books it's a little different. He begs Voldemort to save Lily, but not to save James or Harry. The literal baby. His only motivation in the books for protecting Harry is that he's a massive incel who's still got the hots for Lily Potter. There's another small change between this scene in the book and in the film. In the film, Dumbledore asks Snape if he now cares for Harry. Snape only answers by casting his Patronus. In the book, it's almost the same, except first, Snape responds by saying, "For him!" I always thought movie Snape cared for Harry a little bit, but book Snape, he doesn't give a fuck! His only humanity comes from a girl he got friend-zoned by. Oh, and also he was like super racist towards her. Also in the books, he apparently is the one who causes Voldemort to attack the Potters in the first place. But Harry still names his son Albus Severus in both versions. Okay. It would also be remiss of me not to mention the retconning, the endless retconning. So as J.K. Rowling got older and saw that the world was becoming a more inclusive and progressive place, she realised that her books weren't really all that inclusive, considering she's a feminist and an LGBT ally and all that. Dumbledore is gay, Hermione is black, Voldemort's snake is an Asian lady, apparently. Although I think these retcons were probably made with the best intentions, well, apart from the snake thing, I have no clue what's happening there. Going back and pretending your stories were more inclusive than they actually were isn't going to fool anybody. Particularly when Rowling says stuff like, "Actually, Hermione was always black. I never even mentioned her race." Yes. Yes, you did. Look, I don't want to harp on about this point too much, because if you're the type of person who gets angry over a character's race change, you need to get a grip. I take no issue with these changes in themselves, I just don't like the fact that Rowling's pretending her books have always been super utopia inclusive wonder stories, because they just haven't, particularly since Rowling has outed herself as a bigot. Is it time to address the elephant in the room? So a lot of the re-evaluation of the Harry Potter series comes down to one simple fact. We don't like J.K. Rowling anymore. As you're probably aware, J.K. Rowling used to be considered a universally beloved author. Then she started saying some pretty controversial political opinions about Scotland staying in the UK. We are going to do the trans stuff, just give me a minute here, okay? So Rowling is English, but she has lived in Scotland since the 1990s, so fair enough, she's entitled to her opinion on the issue. I mean, I'm basically Welsh, so I can't say shit. What I do think is slightly mental is comparing people who want Scotland to be an independent country to Death Eaters, wizard fascists. She also said Scottish nationalism contains traces of bigotry. In this context, Scottish nationalism means people who want independence. It doesn't mean what it means elsewhere. So I'm a Scottish and Welsh nationalist as opposed to a unionist who wants the UK to stay as is. Because that's really going well at the moment, isn't it? So was J.K. Rowling wrong about this? Saying Scottish nationalism contains traces of bigotry? Well, you can find traces of bigotry in pretty much any large movement if you go looking for it. For example, here are some noted bigots who are unionists. There's former leader of the Scottish Conservatives Ruth Davidson, there's current leader of the Scottish Conservatives Douglas Ross, there's former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, there's former UK Prime Minister Liz Truss, there's current UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, as well as noted British author J.K. Rowling. During the 2014 independence referendum, Rowling donated £1 million to the Unionist campaign, who went on to win with 55% of the vote, meaning Scotland stayed a part of the United Kingdom. Then Brexit happened, which Scotland didn't vote for, then this idiot became Prime Minister, who by the way Scotland didn't vote for, then this lunatic who no one voted for crashed the economy, and now Scotland is doing really well. If only us nationalists weren't so bigoted. Rowling clearly thinks of herself as a very moral person. She fiercely believes that she is the arbiter of right and wrong, and if you disagree with her, you are the bigot. You might want to remember that last point, it's going to come up a lot. Rowling claims to be a Rowling claims to be a big proponent of free speech, and her supporters often complain about her being unfairly silenced by the woke Twitter mobs or whatever. Yet this apparent free speech activist is also famously trigger happy when it comes to filing or threatening lawsuits. Here she is threatening a Scottish nationalist politician after she pointed out how Rowling was supportive of a Twitter account that would often make misogynistic jokes directed towards members of the Scottish National Party. The example the politician used was wrong, so oops, but Rowling had interacted and followed the misogynistic account she was referring to, so yeah. Hold on, doesn't Rowling consider herself to be a feminist? Because I'd say Rowling, a billionaire, threatening to sue a female elected representative for saying Rowling shouldn't be supporting misogynists, that isn't very slay queen, that isn't very girl boss. Okay, so maybe Rowling isn't as much of a free speech advocate or feminist or anti-bigot as she clearly thinks she is, but for a long time no one really clocked onto this. That was until... It's a bit squiffy, but I hope that's alright. So I want to start by saying that if you are transphobic, you are the problem. The overwhelming majority of Britons are in favour of trans rights. 62% of the UK public want conversion therapy aimed at trans people banned, and 41% think schools should have a specific policy to tackle transphobia. Trans people are our family and our friends, and attacking them is cheap and cruel and deeply misguided. Again, if you are transphobic, you are the problem. Rowling does not consider herself to be transphobic, she just has some legitimate questions over the trans issue. It isn't an issue, to be honest, Joanne. Most people are pretty fine with it. Why is this the hill you've decided to die on? It's pretty infuriating seeing tweets like this coupled with ones like this. Rowling does this thing which I see a lot of people online do actually, where instead of arguing against the points the other side is making, she makes up a fake argument that she thinks we're making, and then she goes against that instead. And transphobes like to do this all of the time. They pretend that trans rights advocates don't know what sex is and that we think there's a million different genders or something. Many conservatives also believe that this is part of a broader woke agenda to indoctrinate everyone into becoming communists or something. It's just like 1984, said every conservative who's never read 1984. George Orwell was a socialist, by the way. Fun fact for you there. They can't accept that, at least in the UK, most people are in favour of trans rights. They think that we've all been tricked and fooled into believing this stuff. I haven't been tricked into anything. I just have empathy. You should try it out sometime. I also have eyes, and I can see, for example, that this is a woman, and this is a woman, even if she doesn't admit it. And this is a man, because, you know, I can see that they are. No one is denying that biological sex is a thing. In fact, we're all pretty fucking aware of it. It's pretty hard to miss. It's kind of the root problem to what we're talking about, you know? If I was to hear someone say, I don't really identify with the gender I was assigned with, I don't really feel like it suits me, I'm not particularly comfortable in this body, and now as a result of that I'm going to start acting and conforming with gender norms not associated to the one that was assigned to me at birth. I don't then boil that argument down to you're just a crazy person who doesn't know what sex is. It's not transphobia, I just believe in biology. Facts can't be bigoted. No, but misunderstanding and deliberately misrepresenting what transgenderism actually means is transphobic, and you fucking know it is. Oh, and then on top of that they say that trans people are godless perverts who just want to sneak into women's bathrooms. I've got no fucking time for these people, I swear to God. Just because Rowling says she isn't a transphobe doesn't magically make her not a transphobe. She should be familiar with this type of argument. You can't say trans women aren't women and then claim to be against transphobia. That's not how this fucking works, darling. Despite most Brits not being transphobic, transphobia is a real problem that I think a lot of people still don't take seriously. As I was making this video, 2 teenagers were sentenced in the UK to life in prison after murdering a trans 16-year-old. This attack was, as the judge described, transphobic, sadistic and brutal. Our snake of a Prime Minister then had the fucking gall to say in Parliament while the victim's mother was present that trans women aren't women. Trans people are not a political issue. They're people, and their very identities are under attack by an increasingly hostile culture. It is becoming increasingly normal, particularly for conservatives, to start attacking and dismantling trans rights, not just in the UK, but all over. In America, many states are already working on banning trans people out of existence, and you can bet your life that's going to get 1,000 times worse if Trump gets into office this year. So when one of the richest, most famous, and most influential writers of her generation says trans women aren't women, she is contributing to an environment and culture hostile to trans people, and pretending otherwise doesn't mean shit to the people she is discriminating against. I don't care if you don't think Rowling is a transphobe, I care what trans people think, and almost all of them say yes, shockingly, the person who rejects trans people's identities is a transphobe. Who would have fucking saw that one coming? I'm probably going to shock literally no one here, but I'm not entirely sure about my own gender identity. I know, I'm just so masculine. So, it's pretty infuriating to see the whole trans debate, especially when it's in the name of protecting the children. Protecting them from what? Being trans? I grew up in the middle of nowhere, in a place not too dissimilar from where I am now. And I gotta say, out in the wildlands, queer representation is virtually non-existent. There simply just aren't enough people in general for there to be much representation of minority causes. If you're growing up out here and you're questioning your sexuality, or especially your gender, you're pretty much gonna be on your own. You probably aren't going to have anyone else to turn to who has a similar experience to you. And on top of that, you're probably going to get relentlessly ridiculed and bullied. And maybe you find comfort in escapism, and maybe reading the Harry Potter books or being super into the movies helps you get through that stuff. I imagine for those people, it's then a pretty big gut punch when J.K. Rowling refuses to acknowledge that you exist, and at the same time demonizes you for who you are. So you know what? Let's do something about that. So we're heading out to Harry Potter landmark, and we're going to plant the flag there, and hopefully then it'll get the message across to trans people that they're not alone in this, For anyone wanting to visit Dobby's grave, you can find it by the trans flag. Hey! But already they seem to like it, so that's a good start. It doesn't really show, but you can see it from the car park. Rowling wrote a story about a boy who lived in a cupboard under the stairs, who found out that what made him a freak to everyone else is what made him special. If that meant something to you, I don't think even Rowling herself can take that away. And really, we shouldn't let her. So, is Harry Potter bad? Honestly, I'm not sure. It depends how much you're willing to put up with Rowling's shortcomings as a writer and bigotry as a person. But when something gets as big as Harry Potter is, I don't think any individual gets to have a say over what the story is or means, not even its original author. J.K. Rowling might be a transphobe in denial, and her books might be problematic as fuck, but they're still ultimately the story of a boy who defeated oppression with the help, love and support of his friends. And that shouldn't be forgotten either. Is Harry Potter bad? Look, I don't know, I can't decide everything for you. Although if you ask me, Azkaban and Deathly Hallows Part 2 are the only movies worth watching. I'm more of a sci-fi person anyway, I don't care about this fucking magic bullshit. What interested me about this topic in the first place is how I've grown up alongside these movies, seeing Harry, Ron and Hermione grow up on screen, and then now being older than those characters myself, and then also in that time seeing the fall of J.K. Rowling as well. Aging, it's a beautiful thing. I think it's interesting how flaws in the work become more obvious. Goodbye. As I was saying before, I was rudely interrupted. I think it's interesting how the flaws in the work become more apparent once we can see the flaws in the author. I just thought it was interesting. I cannot wait for that TV show, because no matter what they do, everyone's going to be really mad at it. And some of us just love to watch the world burn. Okay, that should about do it. Support trans people. They're valid. They have the right to exist without being discriminated against. Thank you very much. Fuck J.K. Rowling. Fuck the Prime Minister. Fuck anyone who's a transphobe. If you want to shout at me at NotOurFuture on Instagram, please support the Patreon, because I'm quite broke. The Rise and Fall of Grunge is going to be the next big one, but I might post some more stuff between now and then. And yeah, thanks for watching. I think this is probably my best video. See you around.